Welcome to Realiteen Talks. My name is Gary McGuey, high school practice leader for FranklinCovey Education. Each week, we're here to take on the real challenges of teen life. Let's talk. Hey team, welcome everybody. Today's topic, default versus design. Do we live by default? Do we live by design? Let's welcome our panel today. On the call today, we have Mary Catherine, we have Nyla, and we have Jorge. So team, welcome, first of all. Thanks for joining. Thanks for sharing your brilliance. So today's discussion, do we live by default versus design? So I guess the first question, when you hear that, what thoughts come to mind when you hear that?
So for me, when I think of default versus design, the big picture is purpose. Are you living by something that's driving you? Are you living with an aim? Are you living towards a goal? Or are you just going through life and existing? And are you just making your way through with whatever happens to you? So that's what I think of.
Right. I'm kind of on the same boat there. I just think about, do you have everything planned out step by step? Like, do you have a specific, like, are you more goal oriented, or are you just doing things as they come? Are you rolling with the punches? One of them is obviously design is more direct in what you want to do. And I think default is more, I'm in this situation right now because I happen to be here, not necessarily because I placed myself there.
When I think of the whole argument of default versus design, I really think of this one thing that my stepfather likes to tell me a lot, in that, you know, we are the architects of our own futures and our own history. And so if you live by default, you let life guide you. Like, you just let whatever's coming your way kind of like take you in whatever direction. Well, if you're actively living by design, you're actually telling life, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go this way. Thank you so much. Peace out.
Nice. So it sounds like everybody here values having this design versus default. Team, where does this come from? Where do you think was this something you just naturally were born with? Did someone help you see this, or where do you think this came from?
Well, for me, definitely, like, seeing my parents, I've always wanted to be like them for sure. So I know that they lived by design. So I always just kind of told myself I have a plan. But it wasn't until recently that I actually understood how much things cost, and I understood how hard life is, that I was able to piece together that maybe I should live by design, because personally, I don't feel like I could be as successful if I lived by default. However, some people do better the opposite. It stresses them out to just have an exact plan or things alike. So they decide to live by default. And that is also another way to become successful. So it really does depend on who you are too.
Well, for me, like Nyla, my parents kind of always told me that you need to have a plan. But even from like kindergarten all the way through 11th grade, I was in the Leader in Me program, and planning and goal setting is a huge part of that. So it's kind of just always been something that I've done, was to make a plan for like the next 5-10 years and to kind of stick by it. But like Nyla said, I'm learning now that it's good to be fluid, and it's good to accept the changing circumstances or even your own changing thoughts that happen, and work them into your plan instead of just sticking to something straight, even if that's not what you want to do.
Mary Catherine and Nyla really just took away my words. And I think too, I want to add, just to really wrap it up on their thoughts, is that sometimes it's not even realizing that you're living your life by design or by default. It's just more like you just don't realize it. Like, sometimes, yeah, people can sit down and be like, okay, I want to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then this is going to happen, and then bam, bam, wabba, bam, whatever. But some other people take a less direct approach and actually influence their life in smaller pieces. And I think it really comes down to our childhood, the stories we read, the people we're influenced by, our teachers, our mentors, even, you know, the people around us in our classrooms. They, for the most part, help us design our life, because they give us examples of what we should and shouldn't do. But, you know, that's not always the case for everyone.
So help me understand for a moment here. Let's say, and I appreciate and value the fact that the three of you are, you know, tremendous students, tremendous leaders. But there's some people on this call who might say, yeah, I'm not really much into planning. You know what? It is what it is, and I'm okay. I'm doing okay. What would be your advice to someone who has that mindset, that paradigm that I'm just going to kind of go with the flow? How would you respond to that?
Well, see, that's the kicker, because not every person who feels that way is necessarily like different for it or unorganized for it. Because like, as I said previously, some people who live by default do that for their own personal benefit, like for their own good, you know what I mean? Because sometimes others can't just say, this is what your life looks like. That may be stressful, so they do just want to go with the flow. But I do want to say there is an extreme on that end, because you won't know for sure how things are going to end up, I guess I could say. Because if you go with the flow too much, you'll kind of get lost. Or some people say lost in the sauce, you know what I mean? Like you're lost in the good feelings of life, but before you know it, everybody's applying to college and you haven't even worried about your grades. Or everyone's applying to college and you have no volunteer hours. So it's fine to go with the flow, but some things do need to be by design just for basic needs for life. But then again, not everybody wants to go to college, but there's criteria for every choice you make. So you can go with the flow, but if you have some sort of an idea, then you can prepare for what you want to do in the future.
Yeah, nice.
Nyla really hit it on the head, like really to the point. And I actually want to offer something else that I've seen from a friend of mine, and he lives his life by design. And he took it to an extreme. And what I'm trying to get here to is both living by default and living by design to extremes is bad. So it's okay to live your life by default and it's okay to live your life by design, but find a sweet spot for both. Because I like to think of it, there's this one quote I got from Chef Ramsay in his Kitchen Nightmares show, and he told the chef that was like renowned for having all these Michelin stars, and he just got crazy with all the ingredients he had and like putting in like basil, tomatoes, and garlic. And he told the chef, you need to calm down and stop designing these plates so much. Let the flavors speak for themselves. Let the smaller things in life, the defaults of it, speak for themselves, and add a little bit of spice. Don't overwhelm it so much because it's not going to taste good. You're gonna have all these flavors in your mouth, the garlic, the tomato, and then you're just gonna get overwhelmed as someone that's trying to enjoy life. That's how I guide at least my own decisions when I'm trying to make life decisions.
I'm hearing balance when you talk a little bit there, or is that fair?
Yes, that is fair to assume. Balance in life, default and design. It's balance.
I've heard you talking about this piece around that everyone here feels they live by design. How could we make it more, what's the word I'm looking for? Concrete. Once again, I'm listening to this podcast, I'm interested, I'm all in, but how would I get started living by design? And could you give me one or two concrete examples what it truly means to live by design?
Find your passions to begin with. Find what you want to do in life and what brings you excitement. Find something that not only is going to make you happy, but it's going to help you live life. Sometimes some goals need some work, and you really have to find if that goal is going to be realistic within today's society. And if it isn't, well, how can you make it be realistic for today's society? And that's where you start. Look at your interests and start researching, like, oh, how can I do this? How can I do that? I'll provide one example from my personal life. I had to choose between doing finances at Jefferson High School or going to Blake High School for theater. I had to really sit back and think, well, what do I want to do? And how am I going to do it? Maybe the finance part is better for me because, well, that can help me go into theater in the future with starting my own theater, my own business. So I looked at my interests and I picked really what I wanted to do.
Right. I liked that. You know, you have to look at life right now and how it's going to be. Personally, how I live by design is I want to know what I'm going to be doing in the future, like what I want my end goal to be, like my career. And then I think about the steps it takes to get there. Right now in high school, I need to maintain these grades. I need to be in these clubs, right? And that will allow me to get into the colleges that I want to get into. Do you know what I mean? Like I have to look at each step of the way. And part of that, something that my school does to see like what life is going to be like in the future, there are certain websites where you can look at the job outlook by the time that you will be in that job. You know what I mean? And that can also help you live by design, because if the job is flourishing, then it's a great time to do it. Do you know what I mean? Like there's certain steps to take to get to your end goal, and that's how you can live by design. But we've said there are extremes on both sides. So if you live by design so much so to where you do one thing wrong, you think your life is over, and I admit I do that sometimes, that's not really a good way to be. You want to be in the middle. You want to see both sides of the spectrum. So
I would say for the, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mary Catherine.
Okay. So I would say for any person who's not just set on whether they want to do one thing or the other, like Jorge was talking about, he was making the choice. I would say do things now so that you can make those decisions later. Like focus on your grades now. Go ahead, take your ACT, do your service hours, all those things. So if you graduate and you're like, I don't want to go to college, I want to start my own business, then you already have that set up to where you can do that. But if you decide later on, oh, I want to go to college, but you didn't do all the work back in high school, you didn't take the ACT, you don't have the grades, then you can't. So I would say do those things now so that you can make decisions later, so that you can live more by default later on.
You're triggering some thoughts. Sometimes, many times you guys have probably heard this quote, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I've never thought that was a fair question to ask teens. Because like you said, we're figuring this out. I say we want to make sure we're on the right path, but these options are still out here. I think we want to ask more, who do we want to be when we grow up? Not what do we want to be, yeah? So team, let me throw this out at you. If I was to say, okay, let's say that we are living by design, what are 2 to 3 words that you would use that you would use to describe someone who's living by design? How do we feel? 2 to 3 words when we're living by design.
I would say they're focused, they're anchored, and they have resolve. Because someone who's living by design, even if they do get thrown off of their course, they're still able to get back to it. So I would say focused. What else did I say? So I literally just forgot.
Anchored.
Focused, anchored, and resolved.
Great words. Thank you.
One word that I would say is driven. Another I would say is responsible. And another I would say is cautious. Those just come straight to mind, know? I definitely want to say driven, because obviously if you have this goal and you're trying to get there, you've got to be driven.
Yeah.
Cautious, because you want to make sure every move you make is very clean, because you don't want anything to come back and bite you, right? Or you don't want anything to go wrong. You have to be very cautious. And responsible. You can't think, oh, I'm going to get an A on this test, but I'm not going to do any of the work. Like, you know what I mean? Or A in my case, but anybody, design doesn't necessarily mean grades. You could live by design because you want to be this or that. Do you know what I mean? But personally, for me, my living by design requires me to get A's. Other people, their living by design is different. So
very cool. Thank you, Nyla.
It's interesting how, what I'm about to say is going to differ so greatly from what Mary Catherine and Nyla just said. But when I think of living by design, I think of like something Steve Jobs said. I think it was like presentation of some product. He said, here's to the crazy ones and the revolution, something like that. So when I think of living by design, I really think of those people that take their goals and they're the crazy ones. They're the ones that want to make change and bring change. They're the ones that inspire themselves and inspire others, and take their own life in their own direction, and don't let people judge too soon. And really just say, no, you're not going to judge me this early into it. Let me do my thing and let me prove you wrong. Let me show you how I can change my life and the life of people around me. That's what I think living by design really means.
I really agree with that, Jorge. I don't think design is like a cookie cutter thing. It's not the same for everyone. It can change for every person.
I agree. Like, I was just about to say that too. Like, that brings up my point of living by design isn't a cookie cutter. It's not the default. Like, we think of the default as, oh, letting the flow, things like that. But your own design could be going by the flow until you have to take the steps to reel it back in. Like, it's okay to not follow the same path as others.
For sure. And people living by design to become an orthodontist may be completely different than people living by design to become a soldier, or to become a teacher, or to become a car salesman. Like, these are all different ways to live by design, but very different things go into each. You know what I mean? Like, it's never, just like you guys were saying, it's not one way, it's not cookie cutter, it's still fluid, but different.
And people don't have to know that you're living by design or by default. That is a personal choice that you can either choose to share or keep to yourself. Some people will not understand why you do certain things or why you don't do certain things, and that's okay. That's human nature. We're afraid of what we don't know, and we're afraid of doing things that are going to jeopardize us in the future. But really, at the end, it comes down to, are you going to take control of your life and go to where you want to go? That's the question you should be asking yourself.
Nice. All right, I'm thinking here, whether you're, 15 years old or 50 years old, everything you just said here, there's some gold, some nuggets for people to embrace, to reflect, to consider. So once again, my friends, thanks for sharing your brilliance, your wisdom. Thanks for getting people thinking around this piece around default versus design. Until next time, everybody, thank you so much. Take care. Be safe. Team, let's recap what we heard today from the team. First of all, we heard that design means purpose, the big picture. Are we goal-oriented? Whereas default means we go with the flow, not really having a plan for the day. Similar to a ship without a rudder, people who live by default will meander aimlessly through life. Secondly, the group shared how they observed various influential people who modeled the power and importance of having a plan, a vision, and how they set goals to help them reach their vision. Maybe we could be a model for one of our friends or family members. Thirdly, we talked about planning. Goal setting begins with us finding our passions, what excites us, establishing our why. See, once we establish our why, the how will follow. Remember, living by design is not a cookie cutter process. It will look and feel different for everyone. Realiteen checks time. We establish Realiteen checks to provide hope and tools and strategies for life. Well, research states that goal setting and planning are proven strategies to develop hope. Let's challenge ourselves, leaving here today to set and achieve a goal. Maybe we start small, maybe a 1 to 3 month goal. Reflect on the why. Why do I want to set and achieve this goal? We should wake up each morning inspired to take the necessary action steps today to help reach the goal. When we live by design, we'll feel peaceful, accomplished, happy, successful. We'll have healthy relationships and develop a foundation for life. When we live by default, we feel somewhat anxious, unaccomplished, and unfulfilled. Our message is to not make sure that we have every minute of our day planned out. Rather, let's make sure we're scheduling time to work on our goal, thus helping us feel more accomplished. Eventually, designing a successful and productive life for ourselves. Until next week, let's talk. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to Realiteen Talks on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify, and leave a review or comment. We'd love to hear from you.